Well, as president of the Schiller Institute in Denmark, I'm very happy to greet you all here in the student house in Copenhagen on this very, very warm summer's day. That's very unusual. Normally summer in Denmark is something about going around in raincoats, and it's not being too warm. It's new times. And friends, get used to it, because that's how it is everywhere. Donald Trump just announced yesterday that the summit that he had planned with Kim Jong-un to take place in Singapore on the 12th of June, which then got cancelled, which then was back on and cancelled and this and that, is going to take place. And this means that one of the big hotspots that has been used by the British Empire and their geopolitical friends to keep the world off balance can be cleared away and can be seen as a sign that we are right now in a time where the old paradigm, the paradigm of geopolitics, the paradigm of setting one against the others, the paradigm that all of the media somehow still is caught up in, is something that is very soon going to be something of the past. And that we hopefully are going into new and much better time with a totally different paradigm. And as some of you know, this is something that is being very actively pursued by China, especially with the Belt and Road policy, with a policy of not only having brought out 700 million Chinese out of poverty, but with the Belt and Road policy of saying, well, why don't the rest of the world get their poor people out of poverty with the same model? With investment in infrastructure, which are the basis for industrializations, which are the basis for moving the whole economy forward. And this doesn't just happen by chance. As a matter of fact, this is the policy which the Schiller Institute explicitly was founded in 1982 of carrying out, and the Schiller and the LaRouche movement has been carrying out for almost 5 decades, and which now is becoming something very real. And in order to make sure that this process of change can continue and can change the world, well, some of our people are very active in coming up with new ideas. And one of them is this new report, Extending the New Silk Road to West Asia and Africa, a vision of an economic renaissance, that has recently been published. And for this reason, we are extremely proud and honored that one of the 2 key lead authors to this report, Jason Ross, you know, Jason Ross from LaRouche in the United States, that has been working with Mr. LaRouche in the basement, that has been working with our scientific team on many of the key problems of the world, and which then also has been involved in laying out, well, what are actually then the program to overcome the problems of the world. He is actually here today and will give us a presentation on his idea on of the new paradigm, and what not only, I would say, what we are about to get into, but also very explicitly what we have to create, what we all have to be engaged in shaping in this very, very exciting world we're in right now. So I think I will simply ask Jason to take us all into a beautiful future that awaits us.
I hope I can live up to that introduction. We'll see. So we really do have a really amazing opportunity right now to change the concepts that are the foundation of how we make decisions. Political decisions, economic decisions, even cultural decisions. There's been an assault on that aspect of us that makes us human. So if we didn't have a connection to immortality, if our lives weren't capable of leaving something behind, of doing something that goes beyond our deaths, we really wouldn't be culturally more than animals. We would be like a form of animal. We'd seek out nice things, And you know, it's nice to have good food. I like to have good food. That's a good thing. It's nice to have fun. But without that ability to live in a way that your life, while you live it, you know will have value forever, then you're not a complete human being. And you can't fill up that hole with either trying to be busy to push away that feeling of emptiness, or trying to buy things to push away that feeling of emptiness. You have to address it by doing something meaningful. And that is, I think, the biggest cruelty of the economic system that we have right now in most Western nations. It is hurting the economy. It is making people poorer. It is concentrating wealth among people who work in finance and assist in it. It is continuing the British Empire. And I think the most tragic effect of it is that it's stealing from us. It's taking away from people what had been developed over centuries as a culture that allowed people to do something that would have real meaning beyond their deaths. And that's what we need to bring back as a part of creating a new paradigm. And this means that we have concepts that go beyond what China has proposed with the Belt and Road Initiative. It's a good proposal. There's more to be done. So I want to get into all of that. And specifically, I'm going to talk a little bit about, as this report does, a little bit about Africa as a case study by comparing how the old paradigm has been relating to the continent and how the new paradigm does. So that's what I'd like to get into, and I think I've got a whole bunch of slides on that. That's what we'll do. So first off, let's just, let me just jump right into a little bit about what's going on right now. The new president of the United States is someone who has created a very polarizing effect in the world, where there are intense attacks against him. People claiming that he's the worst president ever in the United States history, that he's the only person ever to do bad things, and so on and so forth. One of the most awful aspects of this is the lies that Russia, that Vladimir Putin, who apparently is the most amazing mastermind in the world, that Vladimir Putin, even before anybody thought Trump would win the election, was already cultivating him, forcing him to check into hotels where prostitutes would urinate on a bed and then be recorded, controlling social media by spending, less than 0.1% of what was spent on election advertisements. These kind of nefarious things. It's just not true. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump and Russia. It has everything to do with how crucial that relationship is, US-Russia, also US-China, for whether we'll be able to free ourselves from a current paradigm and move into a new one or not. That's why these attacks occur. So that's the kind of world we live in. I want to take a look to illustrate it at not Denmark, not the United States. I want to take a little bit of a look at Africa. So this is a document from 1974. It was prepared by Henry Kissinger, and it was US policy towards many countries in the developing world. This document said that, this is a little bit long, it said that the United States should help control the population of developing countries, because population growth would be a threat to the United States. Can anybody imagine why population growth in another country would threaten US interests?
They might use up their own resources.
Yeah, okay, that's one of the things,
Occupy resources.
Exactly. Yeah, use resources. Yeah, sure. So many of these countries that were referred to were raw materials exporters. Exactly. If a country develops, if the population's growing, and also just development. A developed country, does it export raw materials, or does it export more finished goods? Does it do something with those materials? Yeah, of course. So to prevent this, you have to keep countries poor. And specifically, this document said that food aid should be withheld from countries that aren't trying to limit their population growth. That if a country isn't distributing condoms and offering abortions, that they simply should not be sent any food assistance. Food as a weapon. So this is one outlook towards many parts of the world. Okay. But of course you'd say, well, can't a developing country produce enough food for itself? Well, this document said no. That the kind of money needed for investments in irrigation and in infrastructure were impossible in less developed countries. So no assistance will be made either directly through aid or even through financing. Instead, just have less people die. So that's one way of looking at the world. Let me turn the volume up on this, and let's see if there's a speaker on the... I think we better turn this one up. Okay. Sorry. Okay. There's no speaker on this, huh?
Comes from there, no?
No, it is coming out of the projector. It's just too quiet.
Oh.
Well, I'll just tell you what he said. So here's President Obama. So a town hall with young African leaders. Does anybody know where he's speaking in this picture? Where?
South Africa?
He's in South Africa. Mm-hmm. And he said, if everyone in this room if you think about all the youth that everybody's mentioning in this room, if everyone's living in a big house with air conditioning and a big car, well, the world will boil over. Okay. So what does it take to address people in a nation and say, sorry, you're not allowed to develop? Financial Times. Well, maybe less developed countries simply shouldn't be democracies. Hi. Maybe democracy is an old thing. Maybe we don't need it anymore. Here's Winston Churchill. Here's his view. He says, I hate Indians. They are a beastly people with a beastly religion. The famine was their own fault for breeding like rabbits. I do not admit that a great wrong has been done to the Red Indians of America or to the black people of Australia. I do not admit that a wrong has been done to these people by the fact that a stronger race, a higher grade race, a more worldly wise race, to put it that way, has come in and taken their place. Winston Churchill, who people like to make a hero, he's not. Okay. So let's talk about, the way people, these are kind of silly pictures and I feel funny even using them a little bit, but let's talk about this. Anyone know what this picture might come from? It is in Africa. Well, what institution might use an image like this? Let's put it that way.
Like UNICEF?
Yes, this is from an aid organization. And they're saying, look how good it is to have a water well. Now, is it a good thing to have water? It's better than not. Okay. So is it good to help build wells like this?
Yeah, if you don't have it, it's better to have water than not.
It is.
But it probably would be a lot nicer to have the water come out of the faucets in your house.
Well, wouldn't that be a lot more convenient? Yeah.
Go to a well and get
Yeah, right. So what happens is that people make a comparison. They say, is something good? Well, is it good? Instead ask, is it better? So is it good compared to what? Is it good compared to nothing?
Yeah.
Why is nothing even an option?
Right.
It isn't. So say, what's best? So compared to what's best, this isn't good. This is bad. If as a country you make a policy that you say, you know what, big development, not possible. We'll go to each village and we'll build a well. That's not good. That's bad. How about this? Can't decide what to get for someone's birthday or for Christmas? Give a goat. So this is something that you maybe see in the US at Christmas time. They say, don't buy presents, don't be selfish, buy a goat for a family, a poor family somewhere in the world. So is this a good thing to do? Again, you have to, it's like opportunity cost. You have to compare whatever you might do, not compared to nothing, because why is that the only other option? Compared to anything you might do. So if you're concerned about the shape of the world, and you live in a country that is refusing to give loans for development, that says we will not finance any coal-fired power plants, we'll only help countries build solar panels. If your country has that as a policy and you give a goat, you need to change your country's policy. You need to change the world financial policy. This is not a good thing. It's a bad thing. But they say, well, you can't do anything, right? African countries, they're all corrupt. It's impossible. You got to stick with the goat, you know. It's just not true. It's just not true. For example, China hasn't had this problem. When China, we'll see some pictures. We'll get to them in a bit. So let's talk about the new paradigm. So here's Helga LaRouche in 1996 at a conference speaking about creating the Eurasian land bridge. This is a proposal from EIR, from the Schiller Institute, from the LaRouche movement, going back to that time. Without the Cold War in place anymore, it was possible to unify the world and cooperate and really develop. In September 2013, as I think you've probably heard, President Xi Jinping launched the Belt and Road Initiative in Kazakhstan. I'll just give a couple examples of what has come out of this. So here we've got the new rail line that goes from Djibouti to Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. So Ethiopia is landlocked. It never quite reaches the ocean, and 90% of everything that comes into Ethiopia passes through Djibouti. Now, the old rail line took like a day to get anything from the port into the city. Unreliable, slow. Now, there's an electrified train that gets there in just a few hours. Well, why didn't the corrupt dictators steal all the money, right? Not a problem. It was built. No issue. This is excellent. This is wonderful. Another big project that took place with Chinese financing, the Mombasa-Nairobi standard gauge railway in Kenya. This one's diesel powered. It can be electrified in the future, but you know, so far this part of the line has been built, and the plan is to then bring it into Kampala and then down into Kigali and into Burundi. It costs about 8 times as much right now to get goods into Rwanda or Burundi as it does into, let's say, Egypt or into Kenya or some place that has a port. If it costs 8 to 10 times as much because of all the transportation, how connected to the world can you be if you're in one of these countries? How can you sell, develop a great new product and sell it? How can you get capital goods? Everything costs more if you don't have an infrastructure network. So, great. It was built on time, no problem, no corruption, money wasn't being stolen left and right. It's not really a problem. It's just an excuse that people make. And you can read more about these projects and many more like them in this wonderful report that I encourage everybody to get a copy of. So, a little bit more about the Belt and Road Initiative. Last year in May, there was a forum on the Belt and Road held in Beijing. Over 100 countries had representatives there, dozens and dozens and dozens of heads of state. You can maybe recognize some of the people here. Helga LaRouche was at this conference. She was invited to speak, to be a participant at it. And let's just talk a little bit about what it means, about what the Belt and Road Initiative means, just to say a little bit. The components overall, there's networks of development, corridors of development. And I'm sure you've heard about this, about trains coming from China, into Europe with exports, and then also coming back with goods from Europe. There's also a plan to increase the construction of port facilities to upgrade maritime transportation. Overall, this is an idea of China helping invest in trillions of dollars of infrastructure projects. Very exciting. Now, I want to bring up one thing that this guy said, because this is really funny. After Rex Tillerson, he had gone to Africa. This is like right before he got fired by Trump. Rex Tillerson went to Africa and he was bad-mouthing China. Tillerson said China was stealing the sovereignty of African nations, that China's loans were just to trap these countries in debt. So here's what I think he's the ambassador to South Africa, I believe. He pointed out that what's China done in Africa in the last decade? Invested over $100 billion, built thousands of kilometers of rail, highways, schools, sports stadiums, etc. He pointed out that Tillerson probably landed at ports built with Chinese financing, used roads built with Chinese assistance, and made the remarks in a stadium jointly built by Chinese and Africans. Let's talk about this. So, this is what he says. The Americans complain that China is, giving all of these loans to Africa to snare them in debt. Well, where are the American loans instead? They're not there. This is what he said. What they really want is to keep Africa as it was, poor and divided, to be always controlled by others. This is the ambassador saying this directly. What they worry about is Africa's realization of economic independence with China's support. What they worry about is a strong Africa that can no longer be ordered around politically. Here's an example of this. So this is a comparison of US and Chinese investment across the continent. So where is all the US investment? 2/3 of it is in mining. 2/3 of it. Look at China's. There's mining, about 1/4. But what else is there? Manufacturing. Lots of construction. What is this construction number? What do you think this includes? Mm-hmm. Yeah, roads, rail lines. A lot of this is contracts. A nation says we want someone to come and build a road. A Chinese company puts in a bid, they win it, and then boom, they win the project. And what China will do is China will say, you know what? If you don't have the money to pay for this right now, we'll give the loan. So the Chinese Export-Import Bank financed 90% of the cost of those 2 rail lines that we just discussed. The money goes to the Chinese companies, they build the rail line, and then the country pays them back. No possibility for corruption and money even being stolen, because it's just not even possible, right? And money isn't being sent. Actual services are being provided. So, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the different concepts of economy here. And I had already talked about this in the beginning, about this assault on Trump to try to prevent the US from joining with the new paradigm in the world. This guy Mueller running Russiagate. Trump says, he's kind of famous for saying, working with Russia, that'd be a good thing, not a bad thing. Kind of an obvious statement. Working with China, good potential there. So, let's talk about continuing with this case study. What do we know? So I don't think people actually realize, because maps really misrepresent the sizes of areas. Did you know that China is this? I don't know if you can read the words. Can you read how, this is Africa. Can you read the name of this country in red here? China. Okay, China. Here's the United States and Alaska. What's this orange country?
India?
India. What about this?
Mexico?
Yeah.
Where's Denmark?
Well, you know what? Somebody left it off of this map. I didn't make this. I would never have done that.
Sweden.
Sweden, Norway. Look how tiny Bangladesh is. Right.
Germany, France.
Yeah, Germany and France. Peru. Did you know Peru was that big? So, okay, so Africa is huge. Let's take a look at its size in other ways, too. How about by population? So as far as population goes, China is bigger than Africa. They're drawn sort of basically to scale here. And then the US, and I included England, because even though they don't deserve it, they're on the UN Security Council. Here's energy use. So here's the actual sizes on this map by population. Look at energy use. What can you learn from this picture? What does this tell us?
They use too little energy.
Yeah. Yeah. The level of energy use is much lower. Mm-hmm.
What is it called?
Oh, it's a goofy unit. It's a quadrillion BTUs. British thermal units. I don't know why it's given in that crazy unit. It's like some number of joules, basically, or kilowatt hours. So, okay. And here's energy per capita. So when we think about some of these things about in terms of development, some people say, well, we should use less energy, right? We use too much. We're greedy. We don't care about our destruction of the environment. We're using all of this energy. It's a bad thing to use energy. It's not a bad thing to use energy. It's a good thing to use energy. It's a good thing to be in a society that's able to provide and make use of energy. Also, a lot of the, where does energy get used? Does energy get used in people's homes with their light bulbs? A little bit. How much energy does a factory use that's making something? That's where energy gets used. So one way to stop using energy is to close down all your factories, do less manufacturing, and that's what's happening. Okay, so let's take a look at some more aspects of this. Part of the infrastructure, I want to talk about infrastructure and the value of infrastructure, is that you can see some of these numbers here, the very low amounts of trade between different regions of Africa. There's not much trade. Most of the trade that any particular nation is engaged in goes outside the continent, which isn't necessarily bad, but it does reflect that there's very little connectivity. This is a plan for highways, connecting all the capitals, or most of the capitals. This was planned out decades ago. Still hasn't been built yet. This is some estimates made for how much more trade there would be if roads were upgraded. So let's say that we've got a road here that's, gravel. And if we upgraded it into a freeway with lanes and overpasses and interchanges, some of these estimates are that there'd be an increase of 1,000% or more. Just waiting there. There's all this potential, just waiting. Talked about this and talked about that one. Okay. One of the troubles is these colors are the different gauges of the rail. Why are the rail all these different sizes everywhere?
They were built by different colonial powers.
Yeah. So how about, so 1435, that's standard gauge. You can see some of the new areas. So this is that new line that was just built, for example. Just in the past couple years in Ethiopia. Here's the new one in Kenya. So these are the standard gauge. This is basically what most of Africa is going to continue to use in development. There's already a lot of this thinner gauge, so it's a tough thing to figure out what do you do, as you expand. Do you keep the old gauge? Do you redo everything? It's a tough choice. Overall, though, the rail level is so far below what it could be. I'm just bringing this up not to, say Africa's poor and rub it in. The point is to talk about where the potential is to create growth. Here's another example. Let's put it in perspective. So here's Lake Chad. Chad, Niger, Nigeria. This lake, over the past 50 years, has shrunk in size by 90%. 30 million people depend on its waters, live around that area. It's disappearing. What's to be done? Well, a proposal made decades ago by the Schiller Institute, by Bonifica, an Italian firm, to take the headwaters of the Congo River and bring 5% of them through a canal into the Chari River, which would then lead into the lake and refill it. There'd be no locks. This is all gravity, no locks. The other great thing is that what can you do with a bunch of water in a canal besides move the water? What else can you do with it? You can move things. You can move ships, right? So this will be, this will be nice. If you long distance shipping, it's a very efficient way to move goods. Well, this video probably won't work, but just a few months ago, there was a conference in Nigeria, the end of February, where the Italian ambassador said that Italy was going to put in, I think, 100 million euros. I'm forgetting the number now. I think 100 million euros to do more. That sounds very high. He's going to put in a lot of money to help do studies to get the engineering work done. And then China, a Chinese hydro company, said, hey, we'll also put up the same amount of money. Let's make this thing a reality. Now, why do you think it hasn't been built yet? What kind of objections do you think might be made to a project like this?
Gets away of some natural areas or animals, something.
Yeah, it'll change the environment.
Yeah.
What else?
You will steal the water from other
Yeah, right.
countries, like the Nile. There was
Yes.
discussion about the Nile.
Yeah, and this comes up with the Nile. Now, the Nile flows through a very dry area. If you think of Sudan or Egypt or Ethiopia, you don't really think of lush forests. And there's no shortage of water here. There's no shortage of water. This is why it's only 5% of the headwaters is enough to fill up the lake plenty. Yeah, but that does get brought up. So the DRC, this is an old map. Zaire no longer exists. This is the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. In some of the newspapers there, they say, well, they're going to steal our water. Well, you don't need that much water. It's not doing you any good. Someone else needs it much more, It's like if you've got 10 bikes at home and your neighbor wants to borrow one, and you say, no, I need all of them. Let him use it. So, yeah, and then the environment thing. Say, oh no, this would be very bad for the environment. There's this idea that if we change the environment, that's bad. Have you heard that? That any changes is a bad thing? Well, what's so good about the environment the way that it is right now? Is it designed perfectly?
It's what people used to experience.
We're used to it. Yeah, I mean, did Mother Nature design all the climates of the earth so that there's just enough water, there's never floods, there's never droughts, it's easy to grow food? Is it perfect? No. Yeah, of course not. There's nothing, just because it's the way it is now, so what? Nothing good about it just being a certain way. If it's better, good, make it better. So needless to say, this hasn't been funded because the other thing it will do is bring development. And if you see a country as a great place to get diamonds or cobalt, well, why develop it? You have no interest in it. And this is something that Winston Churchill fought with Roosevelt about. Roosevelt fought with Churchill. Roosevelt said, you've got these colonies. And he also said, we're not going to let you keep these colonies after the war. But he said, you get pennies where you could be having dollars. You just take some little minerals where there could be huge amounts of development there. All these people are wealth. So this is an incredible thing, because much of the water scarcity in the world, not physical water scarcity, but usable water scarcity, tremendous water scarcity, need for development. So take a look at that, right? Here's Zaire, DRC, plenty of water, but a very low rate of water availability and sanitation for human beings. What are some of the problems that come without having improved water? What problems does that cause?
We get diseases from impure water.
Exactly. Yeah, part of it is if it's a desert area, it's drought and you could just not have enough water to grow crops or to drink. So, in a desert area, that's an issue. Certainly, no one's out of water. It's very moist. But here, diseases. So, in terms of medical breakthroughs that have improved life and helped improve health, the biggest ones are like the toilet. Water filtration saves much more lives than doctors do. Right, so irrigation. Now let's talk about energy. This is a chart that compares, each dot's a country. So maybe this is, I don't know, maybe this is Denmark. I don't know. So this is how much energy is used per person. And this is how much money is made per person. Not the best way to measure economy, but at least it's something. So I guess the line kind of gives you a hint, but there's definitely a trend here. Are there any countries that use very little energy, but are wealthy and have a good living standard? If there were, they'd be up here, right? Low energy use. This is energy, so low energy use, but good living. Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. What are some of the countries you think that have, there's some countries I left off that are off the chart for energy use. What do you think some of those might be? Anybody know which country uses?
Gulf states, maybe?
Gulf states? Iceland with the United States. The United States is off the chart, but there's a country way higher than United States. Why do you say Iceland?
Because they have very cheap
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Huh?
GDP per capita and the energy used per capita.
Yeah. No, Iceland does use a lot of energy per capita. One thing is cold, it's a little bit chilly. The other thing is a lot of their industry uses a lot of electricity. They do a lot of aluminum production in Iceland because they've got such cheap electricity. Well, Canada uses more than the United States. Why is that?
Oh, they eat the streets.
I wish.
No.
Why does Canada use more energy per person than the United States? It's cold. Yeah, right. Exactly, yeah. So some of this stuff, it's just about your climate, of course. So maybe if you have a more comfortable climate, you'd have less energy. How about a country like the Cayman Islands? Where do you think they would show up on this?
Very high.
You're right. Whatever the energy use is per person, but, fake money.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's this is an image currently of Africa taken at night. And you can see also the Gulf, Southwest Asia, and the southern part of Europe. So you can just get a sense of what, first of where the development it is, but also just how low the level of development is. This darkness isn't because of laws to have good for astronomy, right? Compared to what could the world look like with full development. Here's a specific example. So, Congo River here, a lot of water flow, plenty of water. There's an area way down here we're going to zoom in on. Here it is, so DRC, where the river goes down over the course of about 10 kilometers. I think it loses 100 or 200 meters. So it's a very, very, very big, very steep drop there. There's a proposal to put in some dams in this area, which would create 40,000 megawatts of energy. How much is 40,000 megawatts? Does that mean anything to, just looking at another number I wrote down here.
One normal big-sized nuclear power plant, that would be 1 gigawatt.
Yeah.
So it would be like 40 fairly modern nuclear power plants.
Or around 5 times the energy use.
Yeah, Danish energy use, something like that.
What's the energy use right now in the DRC? How many watts of energy, on average, are used per capita in the DRC? Anyone have a guess?
Per capita?
Yeah, per capita.
Very low.
Well, let's start with, what do you think it is in Denmark, for example? Hmm?
12,000.
12,000? It's lower than that.
Hello?
Yeah. So I'll tell you the U.S. In the U.S., it's 1,500 watts.
1,200.
Okay, yeah, that might be about right. So let's, or like 1,200, 1,000, let's say. So 1,000 watts. So what that means is, watts is a unit, these light bulbs, maybe you see the number written on of how many watts. So you can think that every day, for each person, there's 1,000 or 1,200 watts of power being used. Does anybody know what 746 watts is? There's a special unit. It's a horsepower. Okay. But you think about what we do with electricity now, it's things a horse could never do. So let's say Denmark, let's just say 1,000 watts per person. How many people could this much energy support at Danish energy uses? 40 million. 40 million people. Now let's talk about the DRC. Anyone, now that we have got some numbers, energy use per capita in the DRC, any guesses? US 1,500, Denmark, let's say 1,200 or 1,000. How about in DRC?
50 and 100.
Nope.
25.
Nope. Nope.
10.
11.
11.
11. 11. So you'd think, okay, here's a country, we've got the Congo River, huge water flow. potential to build a series of dams. You don't have to build them all at once. It's engineered out so you could keep building, get one could be working as you construct another one and just keep adding more energy along the way. So this would be, you would never do this, but at a use of 11 watts per person, this would be enough for how many people? Like 4 billion. But of course, we would, no one should be using only 11 watts. Because that means that there's no industry that's using electricity, right? So you'd say, wow, this seems like a great idea, right? You build this, there's going to be energy. Well, you can start building factories. The economy is going to increase dramatically. People will live so much better. This is the kind of project that the World Bank would say, oh, great, we'll give you a loan. We'll help you build this. You'll easily pay back the loan because you'll do great. Well, what do you think the World Bank thinks about this project? The World Bank for Reconstruction and Development.
Too expensive?
Yeah, kind of. They have actually multiple complaints. So too expensive, maybe that's one. What's any other complaints that they might have about this?
Going towards the natural environment.
It'll destroy the environment. Okay. So you've got like several, couple dozen millions of people living in energy poverty. And they say, well, this might disrupt the fish.
Well, the fish. Well, we can just eat them.
Not if they're not there. What will people eat? And it's like it's good to laugh at, but it's also to realize in another way that that's disgusting, like absolutely revoltingly disgusting to tell a country, I'm sorry, people don't matter. Fish. So this is this environmentalism stuff. I mean, of course, no one wants dirty water and dirty air. Okay, fine, sure. It's good that we've got things that keeps them clean. But if the laws go and say that any change is inherently bad, forget it. So the project was dropped by the World Bank. It said we're not going to finance it. Absolutely no. Again, there's no contract signed, but a Chinese hydropower company has now come in and said, well, we'll finance a study on this one. Really figure it out. So that's good news. Okay, I don't want to talk too many charts. Okay. I want to talk just a little bit about infrastructure, and then we can just chat. This is America. I don't know what Denmark's grade would be, but also I don't know if people know how American grades work. You've got A is the best, then B, then C, then D, and then F. So this is a very low grade. Just to give a couple of numbers, these guys, the American Society of Civil Engineers, say that it would cost $2 trillion to fix the infrastructure. And that it's enough to get it up to like a B or something, but not high-speed rail. Just fix the things that are currently broken. So they say it'll take a couple $1 trillion. They say not fixing it will cost $4 trillion. So if you could spend 2 to save 4, just even financially, what's your return on investment? You get 100% beyond it, right? Your payback's 200%. So why would these investments not get made? Well, economists are idiots, that's why. In 2007, there was a survey of economists. These were American economists, but I don't know how different it would be here. And the economists said that 3% chance that the economy will shrink in 2008. Odds of less than 1 in 500 that it will shrink by more than 2% in 2008. What happened in 2008? Yeah, right. A collapse. So if you've got a field of people who think that they're experts, who were almost completely uniformly wrong, where only 1 in 500 was even in the right area, you'd think that there must have been, this was a decade ago, there must have been a lot of soul searching, right? Universities, they fired their whole economics departments and brought in new people and said, how could we be such fools? We need to totally change what we're thinking. Did that happen?
They got new textbooks and everything.
They might have got new textbooks. I don't know how different they were. It never happened. So you can pretty much out of hand disregard anything being said by an establishment economist. It's a failed profession. It's worse than astrologers or palm readers and fortune tellers. This is even worse. Fortune tellers do way better than 1 in 500. They make general statements that you probably think are true.
Monkeys throwing darts.
Monkeys throwing darts. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Here's a chart. What's the GDP going to be? You know, you'd probably get plenty of monkeys. Why not? You know? By the way, I just want to bring this up. Have you heard the story that if you had like 1 million monkeys with 1 million typewriters in 1 million years that they would write great poetry? Has anybody ever heard that?
Yes, sure. Shakespeare drama.
Yeah. Do you know that that experiment was actually tried?
For a million years?
No. But they got 12 monkeys, and they gave them 12 computers, and you know what they did?
Got Nobel Prize in economics?
Well, if they ran the experiment longer, they probably would have. Well, the monkeys mostly like broke the keyboards or pooped on them. They didn't type anything. So they tried it, no poetry. Okay. So, you know, and then here I've got a video, but the audio is not going to work, so. Oh.
Where the world monetary financial system is actually now currently in the process of disintegrating. Nothing mysterious about this. I've talked about it sometimes. It's been in progress. It's not abating. What's listed as stock values and market values of the financial markets international is bunk. These are purely fictitious beliefs. There's no truth to it. The fakery is enormous. There is no possibility of a non-collapse of the present financial system. Now, it's finished now. The present financial system cannot continue to exist under any circumstances, under any presidency, under any leadership, or any leadership of nations. Only a fundamental and sudden change in the world monetary financial system will prevent the general, immediate chain reaction type of collapse. And what speed we don't know, but it will go on. It will be unstoppable.
What do you think about that? Oh, did you hear it, by the way? Okay, well,
That was spot on.
okay.
Say the main idea for the audience.
Sure. So this is July 25th, 2007, LaRouche in Washington, D.C. He says there's no possibility of a non-collapse of the financial system. None. It's going to come on, and it will be enormous. What's listed as financial values are fake. They're bunk. There's no way to prop this up.
LaRouche is not an economist.
Pardon me, LaRouche?
LaRouche is not an economist.
Well, I think that they, I don't know if he was on the survey or not.
I am economist.
Uh-huh.
I'm totally agree with all.
Okay. Yeah. So, I think the universities probably ought to, say, hey, he's written economics books. Let's give these out to the students. If we were so wrong, let's learn from somebody who was right. Okay. So why is LaRouche right? What's wrong? What are the wrong thoughts about economics that make people such idiots? Let's talk about that for a little bit, about what economists don't measure. I want to talk about infrastructure in a way that LaRouche does. He says that infrastructure is creation of a habitable development of a synthetic rather than a presumably natural environment. So we're here in a city. There's a lot of people outside. People apparently like living here. What makes this synthetic environment outside different from a natural one? What are some of the things? Like, what's different from what we're doing right now compared to us hanging out in the woods and having a talk?
It's a long list.
I know, let's list a few of them. It's not a hard question.
We would die early.
We might not be alive. Okay, that's a good point. Yeah.
We wouldn't have an easy time coming here in the first place. We would have used, if we take our respective places of starting point, we wouldn't have come here at this time because there's no basic infrastructure.
Yeah, right. We had roads, we had trains, we had cars, we had bikes, we had subways.
We wouldn't have time to come anyway because we were so hungry that we simply get something in the stomach.
Okay, right. How would this PowerPoint work out in the woods?
Yeah.
I don't think it would. Okay, so forget that. No electricity, no transportation, no water system, right? We got toilets downstairs. Wonderful, right? So we create a much better environment than the one that currently exists. LaRouche writes that man as a creator in the likeness of the great creator is expressed by humanity's creation of the artificial environments that we call infrastructure. So let's look at infrastructure not as specific things, like one new bridge, even if it's an important one, or one rail line, or one new power line or power plant. Let's talk about creating an artificial environment as a whole. And I want to talk about 3 aspects of that briefly. One of them is the fact that human population has increased dramatically. And we did this. We changed how many people there can live. So, for example, if we paused society, if we paused human knowledge at the year, let's say, 1000, could the population ever have reached this level? Could that kind of society of the year 1000, by having babies and raising them, could we have had 7 billion people on the planet? Correct, we wouldn't. So what made it possible to have more people? Machines. We talked about some of them. Toilets.
You have to make sure that, you know, 6/8 of your children doesn't die.
Yeah, you know, cutting down on, you know, deaths in childbirth for the children and the mothers. Yeah, right. Stopping diseases, preventing injuries, also increasing what people have, what people are able to produce. You can avoid famines and things like this. So LaRouche's first measure for economics, he said, start with society. How many people can you continue to maintain in a certain area of land? What's the potential? You wouldn't necessarily want that many people actually living there, but what could it be? What could be supported at a certain level of society? And let's talk about it relative to what we've done with that land. Have we improved it? Have we built an irrigation system and stopped the floods by having a dam or protection against from the sea? Okay. So the way we did that, one of the biggest aspects is energy. Prometheus, in the Greek story, created the human species. He says that humans already existed, but we didn't know anything. We lived in caves. We knew nothing about medicine or sailing or any of this. Prometheus says that he gave fire and poetry and mathematics and the calendar and agriculture and using animals and making metals. He says all of this, right? So fire. We've had a lot of different kinds of fire. All right, there's something great you can do with just a normal, what can you do with a wood fire that you can't do without it? What are some of the things that a fire lets us as a society, as a civilization do?
You can cook better food.
You can cook better food, yeah. Tastes better? What are some of the, besides the taste, what else, what are some of the other benefits of cooking food?
I don't think that you'll get much energy out of raw meat as a human being. I don't know exactly because I'm not a doctor, but I think you will get very little energy out of it.
Okay. So maybe we can digest it better.
Kill diseases.
Kill diseases. That's right. Who knows what was in that meat? You cook it, better health.
Survive the winter.
There you go. Stay warm. That's a very important use. Yeah, right. Big help. There's also some foods that are poisonous until they're cooked. I'm forgetting the name of it. It's a kind of root. Anyway, so it expands what you're able to eat. Keeps you warm. Anything else with the wood fire?
Keep animals away from you.
Scare away animals. You can see things at night. A lot of benefits. Yeah, okay. With charcoal, you can create metal. This is like magic. You can turn a rock into metal. It's pretty phenomenal. Imagine what it was like when people were first doing this. You go to the guys, you say, oh my God, you have rocks and you created like a sword or a horseshoe or something. It's pretty amazing. Steam energy. Turn a rock not just into a metal, turn a rock into motion. You didn't even turn a thing into another thing. You turned a thing into a power. Wow, right? How about electricity? What are some of the advantages of electricity compared to a steam engine? What can you do with 746 watts of electricity that you can't do with 1 horsepower of a horse or a steam engine? Okay, big, yeah, thinking big, okay.
Decentralized power source in the sense of having a machine. Before you would need, you know, you would have one power source and then you would have all these, not wires, but
Belts.
things, rods or whatever, something to connect the power to one another. But with electricity, you can have a decentralized machine just sitting there getting some electricity.
Yeah, that's one of the huge ones.
Much more efficient.
They can move the power production out of the city. You know, beforehand you had all these old factories that we see. Most of them have been taken down now, but they had their own steam engine inside.
Yeah, each one has its own engine, and that means each one also needs what? Coal and water. Right? So imagine you don't have to bring all this coal in anymore, right? You can just make it at the power plant and bring in a wire. Much easier. And it lets you do new things, right? This projector, you could not have a steam-powered projector, camera, right? This is not going to, cell phone, a steam-powered cell phone, right? Couldn't happen, right? And then nuclear power. I'll say a little bit about why nuclear is so much better than other forms. Well, this is an interesting one. So among the energy that we use, I should have asked to guess, what % of the energy that we use is electricity? I've got the US and China on this chart. So US up to about 16%, you know, China almost at the same level. Would you have expected it to be higher?
Yeah, much higher.
Yeah. What else is energy used? How else is energy used besides as electricity?
Heating.
Heating?
Transportation.
Transportation. Yeah. Transportation's the biggest one. And then also making electricity. A power plant is typically only about 50% efficient. Like a coal or a nuclear plant. Yeah. Okay. And then here's what's so great about nuclear. So I've got 2 different reactions on the left and on the right. So does anyone recognize this molecule? What's this one called? It's methane, yeah. So this is the natural gas. This is the gas that you use in your home for your stove, for example. Natural gas is methane. And so here's the reaction. Methane and oxygen combust. They form carbon dioxide and water. The amount of energy per reaction is 8 electron volts. Here's a nuclear reaction. This is a hydrogen, proton, and a neutron. Usually, hydrogen is just the proton. The neutron's not there. So this is a special kind of hydrogen. And we give it a special name. Hydrogen 2 or deuterium. This is called tritium. Tri for 3. So this has got 3 nucleons, but 1 proton, so its name is still hydrogen. When they combine, they create helium, 4, normal helium, like in a balloon, and a neutron. This is how much energy the helium and the neutron have when they shoot out. The helium, 3.5 mega electron volts. What is M? What is mega?
1 million times.
1 million, right? 6 zeros. The neutron comes out with 14.1 million electron volts. If we put this together, how many times more is it than 1 methane combusting? 2 million times more. Yeah. So this is why nuclear power plants need so little fuel, and why nuclear processes, beyond the form of our current ones, have the potential to just totally transform our relationship to energy. Okay. Boom. Okay. I think I'm going to just skip through a few of these. I was just going to point out that we've also changed which elements we're able to use in terms of creating an environment for ourselves. We've made it possible to move more quickly certain distances. China's high-speed rail network, within the last decade, they went from having no high-speed rail to the most in the world. Today, 60% of all the high-speed rail in the world is in China. None of it was in China in the year 2000. They just did it. Okay? And did they have the money for it? Is China a rich country? It's not a rich country. Do they have a lot of reserves and currency right now? Yeah, but also how many people are there? Right? So per capita, and China's not a rich country. China's still a developing country. But this is, and it is developing. It's really doing it. Right, okay. Okay, so water and all sorts of things, machine tools. I think that's pretty much most of what I want to say. I'll just wrap up with what our, what LaRouche puts as the 4 basic principles of economics to move things forward, and then I'll just return to what I opened with about being a human being. So the 4 parts are Glass-Steagall, which, look, if you're going to take a physical idea of economics, that increasing the potential number of people and our power over nature and the energy that we have available and the kinds of resources that are resources to us, you say, well, how do we then organize society with laws to make that happen? Now you've got an idea, and now you say, how do we make it happen? It's like an engineer. You say, okay, I really want to make this thing that moves people upstairs without them having to do anything. And then you actually make an escalator. You got to figure it out. So what are the ways to implement this idea in an economy? There's 4 main aspects. Shut down banking speculation with Glass-Steagall. Create national banks to finance infrastructure, because the value of infrastructure doesn't come in people buying tickets to get on a train. The value of this train network in China isn't the number of tickets that are bought. What are some of the other values of having this network?
Being able to transfer food.
Mm-hmm. Being able to visit people, being able to change what you can do as a commute. I mean, there's a lot. So we have to direct that money then towards economic activities that really make us more productive, and then boom, we've got to create fusion energy. We've got to go out into space. I already mentioned what makes fusion so powerful. This is nuclear fusion. This does not occur in our current nuclear power plants. Fusion is about 10 times better than our current nuclear power plants. And the research is just way too slow. I mean, when is this ITER supposed to be done now? 2025? I mean, we'll see, you know. This is the big, the thing being built here in Europe and France. Yeah, it's way too slow. Okay, so let's do all those things, and okay, I'm going to stop with that and just see what people think. So. Oh yeah, sorry, that last thought was that in doing all of this, you know, the point is also, you know, it is building the infrastructure, it is developing, but then it's also really about, are people, as we grow in this way, going to have an opportunity to do something valuable with themselves? You know, can you grow up and say, hey, I'm going to have a job that's actually useful. I'm happy about what I do for work every day. It's useful and productive and making the world better, and I'm happy about it. Or think about when, for example, when the United States space program going to the moon, not everybody in the United States, for example, worked directly on going to the moon. But just being in a society that is doing that as a goal, how does that change your idea of what life's like? You know? So I think that, you know, one of the biggest benefits of this is it's really just going to unlock people's thoughts. Being on a positive trajectory like this, I think is going to really help just open up people's thoughts to solve a lot of the problems that we're having a very hard time with. And I think it'll totally change the way that research, for example, takes place. I think it'll really help people think a lot better and be happier. Okay. All right, that's what I wanted to say. Okay. Any thoughts, reflections? Okay.